Merci d'être venu d'ailleurs. Alors, je m'appelle Franck Wagner. Je vais parler d'une adoption Scrum de l'équipe que j'avais le plaisir de travailler. Euh, on va essayer de faire ça un peu interactif. Si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas tout de suite à poser la question. Comme moi, je suis été assez dedans, il y a peut-être des choses que je vais oublier d'expliquer. Comme ça, on peut rebondir tout de suite. Peut-être première question, est-ce que vous préférez en français ou en anglais? Anglais, 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 français? Je vois rien, il y a trop de lumière. Okay, so I will do that in several parts. First part, just to give you a bit of the context that we were working on. I will also tell you a bit how we prepared this transition to Scrum with the team. The heart of the presentation will actually be the sprints that we did. I will talk the observations and the facts we had during every sprint. And this is where I count on you to ask me more questions. I will put some different angles on what we observed, and then we can conclude. So context. So I'm working for IBM in the software group, part of the organization that is delivering the product that we call operational decision management. Anybody heard of that one? Okay. Maybe you know it better under the name ILOC-J rules. That's when was before the acquisition. Anybody? Okay, all the others we need to talk. So it's quite a big organization. It's about 150 people contributing, organized in 17 plus teams. And I will talk about one release cycle during 6 months that we worked on. We were 3 teams doing a new component for the product, a new web application, and that was about 30 people. Basically, everything was new during this release cycle. So it was the whole organization was experimenting with something new that we called the delivery teams. So that was the first time that we worked in cross-functional teams. So historically, we were working development teams for themselves, quality teams, documentation teams, you name it. And this time, we put people together. We had developers and testers, usability experts, documentation, working on the team, delivering for the release. Out of these teams, there was one using Scrum. Everybody on the team was new to Scrum. Only the Scrum Master was part of a previous transition of another team, year back. But it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't in an empty space. So the whole organization already had some well-established Agile practices around the actual doing. So we had continuous integration. We did have and still have a practice of automating tests as much as we can, from unit tests, of course, integration tests. In some teams are closer to doing TDD, test-driven development, than others, but these coding practices are well established. So that's quite comfortable to start Scrum with, because actually all we wanted to add was the project management aspect that we were experimenting to become more agile. So how did we prepare the transition? As usual, you do some training, right? So we took the videos we found on YouTube. We did have the chance in IBM. There's one team dedicated to coaching agile transitions. So they produced a lot of materials also. So we took all these. The team did some self-paced training. So they individually they took the material. We had sessions once, twice a week where we all came together talking about what we just saw, and that didn't work. So we just stopped. We did that 2 weeks maybe, and then we said, that's too dry. Let's just do it. So we did a toy project. We spent 2 sprints on a project as a team. Usually, so maybe why did we have that time to do that? Usually between releases, every team member gets 1 week where they can do whatever they want. We call that cool down period, but it's an individual activity. And the team just decided, hey, why don't we put that together and we'll do a 2 toy project all together, experimenting Scrum. So we did that and we never stopped. We just continued doing Scrum. And we went into the next delivery cycle. So what was our Scrum? How did we do Scrum? We started off quite classical, I would say. So it's a 2 sprints, 2-week sprints. And we did all the meetings, daily Scrum, planning meeting, retrospective, demo meeting. The backlog is filled with stories, like Mike Cohn describes them, right? Stories as actor, I want action, such that achievement. And we estimate them story points, relative sizes, stories, relative one to another. During the sprint planning sessions, we split stories in tasks. We estimate them in hours. That's what we said we would do, but we never did. So we came up with tasks out of the planning. So that was good achievement already. And then we just did the stories. So planning poker for the estimations. Maybe we'll see that later. Okay, we also put in place a definition of done so that we knew when the story was done. Very simple. Product owner has to accept. We do not know any major defects. We do have documentation written. So this was the first time we were cross-functional. So this was really new. I mean, this was a challenge to make sure that we had the documentation. In the beginning, we accepted the fact that the documentation content was ready. It was not actually integrated into the document as we deliver it, in documentation as we deliver it, because infrastructure was a bit late on that. But we wanted to have the content. We wanted it to be there. We wanted continuous integration to be green. I mean, continuous build should be green. All the tests should be green. And of course, we would have written all the tests. But well, we did have that practice already. But it's still worth mentioning for a nice definition of done. Okay, sprints. Any questions so far? Oh, it's product. Oh, so the product we ship is a off-shelf documentation. So we ship DVDs, and there's documentation that is shipped with the product. I hope so. But there's an online version also. Every story needs to be. I mean, every story needs to be documented if it is a user-facing story. And we write all our stories. We wrote them user-facing. So there was documentation for every story. Sometimes there wasn't. So we discovered that during the planning, and we said, okay, this one is one without documentation. Function. I mean, no. I mean, end user documentation, right? For the people paying for it. Okay. Sprints. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, no test coverage. No, just having edited test. Huh? Yes, it's vague. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. We'll come to it, and it will be getting even vaguer. But we will talk about it in a minute. Oh. Okay, first sprint. Here we go. So as everything was new, there was no backlog. So we spent the first sprint together with the product owner writing stories. So we discovered what we wanted to do. We wrote all the stories together with the product owner, and we saw that the achievement part of the stories is difficult when you start with it, right? As user, I want. That's easy. Why? It's hard. But at the end of writing 71 stories, we got used to it. So then it's now it's a habit. We know how to do that now. We estimated the stories. So if you go in estimating many stories initially, it's a bit hard. So, and if it is the first time you do relative sizing, that's difficult. So we did some T-shirt sizing first, small, medium, large, and then we did planning poker for each of the T-shirt sizes. But in the end, we had a fully estimated backlog, and at least the high priority ones were ranked. The rest was a bit, well, immature. But we come to grooming later. So first sprint, so that's usually, people call that sprint 0, but it happened to be our first sprint. Second sprint. So we did have a lot of work to do for infrastructure. So we had to get the code repositories, continuous integration, built, test framework. Everything had to be set in place because it, as I said, was a new component. But we could leverage what we had for the rest of the product. So that was quite fast. We had some new functionality where we needed some new technology that we never were using before. So we had an investigation, we call that Spike, for that one. But nevertheless, at the end of the 2 weeks, so only 2 weeks, we delivered. We decided how we wanted to deliver in this project. So we delivered the first story, not very impressive, but we delivered it. And we kept that delivery mode throughout the whole release. And that's the one that we used to have communication with external teams or with product owner, with designers, user experiences, and with whoever. And we used the same delivery mode that we had in the first sprint, first real sprint. The review meeting, the retrospective meeting, we found out that we had difficulties knowing how much stories we could do in a sprint. So in the first sprint, we felt we could have done more, but we didn't know how to do that. So we just decided, hey, why don't we do a planning session in the middle of the sprint, just to make sure that we are on track, or if we can add something. Okay, so it was an idea, came from the team, and we tried that one during the next sprint. Third sprint. Any questions, comments so far? Okay. Okay. So that's the first sprint. We changed our definition of done, because we discovered that the processes in IBM for delivering software, there is some legal aspects to that, and there's some additional processes related to legals. They take some time. So we wanted to make sure that we have triggered whatever we had to trigger related to a story in time, and track it over the rest of the release, so that we don't run late on this one. Because formerly experiences, we were running late on these processes, and then all of a sudden the release is getting very excited. Release management is getting very excited also, right? We found out that the acceptance tests that we had on the stories were maybe a bit too weak. So there was spent some time at the beginning of each sprint actually understanding what we wanted to do, and sometimes so that was not very comfortable. So we we decided to have more explicit grooming on the stories, so that some of the team members would go out and see the user experience experts, talk with them over the designs that go with the stories even before the stories get into the sprint, just to make sure that the designs make sense from a technical point of view. And we added, so that was the mid-sprint review that we talked earlier. We added one story during the sprint because we found that we were making faster progress than what we thought at this planning meeting. One sprint was during vacation. Okay. Actually, no, vacation. So there were still 2 people working, so they did some additional investigations. But there was no real delivery. It was just didn't make any sense. And the for me surprising thing, once everybody returned from vacations, sprint number 5, we just continued delivering like the sprint before vacation without any interruption. It was a surprise for me because in the previous experience going with another team, going to Scrum, whenever we came back from vacations, it took us a sprint or 2 to get back into the mode of delivery. So that was a good surprise. No problem with vacations. So we do that regularly. Sprint 6. This is the first one where we really could say we had an established velocity. So there was 3 sprints in a row that the velocity was about the same size. So that was very comfortable because this is the moment where we started, where the burn down charts started to make sense, and we could talk scope because we knew the deadline. We knew the stories, but we didn't know how far we could get because we had no velocity. Once we had the velocity, we could have some predictions, and we could have some interesting talks with the product owner, and we started adjusting stories. So some stories were deferred, some were cut into smaller pieces, keeping more important parts, and deferring smaller, less important parts. And as I said, grooming really kicked in at this moment, and designs came in more and more mature. Yeah, that's the maybe the most intense sprint we had with usability, where we decided a lot of features that were really user-facing and had a big impact on the experience of the user in the application. We had some trouble still, yes. So that's what I was about to talk about. So we had some trouble. Part of the trouble was the testing framework. The automated testing, integration testing framework was not something that we could build alone. So we were depending on other teams, and we were running late on these. So we didn't have the coverage of integration tests that we needed to go fast, and we were slowed down by regressions. So the team decided to introduce manual test plans, put them on a wiki, maintain them, and to run them as often as we could within a sprint, until we got more automated regression tests available. But we took on this as a team. We took on manual testing. No. That was the Scrum team, the delivery team during a sprint was doing the tests that they were maintaining on the hot code base, the one that was under development. So next sprint. So this time we got the impression that we were moving faster than the designs could follow. That was a bit uncomfortable because they came back with things they wanted to change, and that we didn't want to touch anymore. So this is where we put in even more effort into the grooming, so that we really had the technical experience with the designers at the moment that they were thinking about the designs, way before the stories came into the sprints. Did that work? We thought it did, but we were close to the end, so you will see. So it paid for the next release, because we continued this habit. That was a very difficult sprint. I prefer not to think about it. It's the add part. So as I said, we had instabilities, we didn't have the test framework, we did have manual tests, we did have a lot of regressions, and actually we did have defects coming in faster than we could resolve them. So we decided to record them, even the defects within a sprint, we recorded them, just to not forget them. Usually we would record defects only at the end of the sprint, so that we don't forget them, because that was part of the definition of done, that we would register the defects that we couldn't fix before the end of the sprint. So there was so many coming in, so we decided to register them during the sprint. And we were using RDC, so Rational Team Concert. That's the publication part of the talk. Appreciate. Okay, done. And as these times were difficult, we tried to have more quality just by the fact that people would talk to each other before they take any decisions. Usually developers, they're taking many decisions a day, just them and the computer. But we tried to get off the computer as often as possible, just to get the second thought before we take any decisions, because the times were so rough. Sprint 9. So actually that was supposed to be the last sprint that we were doing stories. But it wasn't. No, what happened was that as we were delivering increments during 8 sprints previously, the product owner just took one of these sprint deliveries, took it and got out to customers, showing it, right? So it's difficult to say how revolutionary this is, because usually we will ship better releases to customers later than that, right? We were about 4 weeks from shipping beta, and our product owner did go visit customers, showing the feature, and it was working. At least the bubble we were talking about. The full product wouldn't be working, but the part of the component that we were developing in, it was working end to end. So they showed it. And the designers had come up with a revolutionary, innovative idea for picking date intervals. So we implemented that. It was working fine. So this is what the product owner took to the customers. Customers looked at it, said, that's crap. So we got feedback, and we just implemented the classical date pickers. The really important thing to mention is we shipped the thing the customers wanted, and we didn't have to wait beta. And usually, if we have design problems like that, we usually have to wait the next release 6 months from now to fix it, and sometimes we never fix it, because there's always more important things to come in. So that was an extremely good experience, using Scrum together with the designs, getting customer feedback, and actually shipping something useful. Yeah. So that was the bonus sprint. So usually, as I said, we should have had finished with sprint 9. But as we got customer feedback, we got allowance to go one more sprint, and to add more features. And the team actually decided, well, no, we prefer quality over features. Let's do quality first. So we did more quality and less features. That's very satisfying to say for a team lead. Okay, and then for reasons I don't want to say, we did have 2 sprints of stabilization because that's how the organization works. We do construction, we do stabilization, and we ship. And as the majority of the other teams are not agile, we still have stabilization. So we participated in stabilization. Okay. Any questions, comments so far? Different perspectives. So there's various angles we can.
Right. Just one question. How long are your sprint?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. So there's various perspectives. Yeah. Oh.
For stabilization, do you use techniques such as the zero bounce back or stuff like that? What do you use for stabilization in a
No,
Scrum
we
team?
have the QA team ganging on the product. They explode the defect counters, and the development teams run after them fixing. We call that stabilization. Sorry. So different perspectives. So backlog is interesting to look at. I already mentioned the user experiences and design perspective. I will talk about these. Product management. So product owner. That was our product owner was product management. So that would be interesting to talk about, but I don't think we will have the time today. Testing is something interesting to talk about. As I mentioned, we had a tester on the team. First time we had a tester on the team as we developed software, and he really liked that he was part of the definition of the story because he was adding acceptance tests. So once the product owner said what would be the happy path for the story, he would be adding boundary cases that he could think of and that he would be testing against. So, and he really liked that one. And the developers also, because then they knew what kind of weird things the tester would do to their code. Estimation is an interesting thing to talk about. We had a lot of discussions during Sprint 0 with the team once estimations were done, and everybody was asking me, yeah, but when will we do the re-estimation? Because that's all wrong numbers. When will we do re-estimation? So we had many discussions, and we never ever did any re-estimation. But as we went, they didn't feel the need anymore. What we did, whenever we had new stories, or we dropped stories, or we cut stories, or we split stories, we would have sessions to estimate the new stories in poker, small increments always. But that was it. We never re-estimated the whole backlog. So defects is interesting. Non-solo. I don't know, does that talk to anybody? So even before we did Scrum, developers spontaneously would share a screen to debug, mostly debugging. But since we do Scrum, we can see them spontaneously. They go share a screen to develop, to debug, to discuss. I mean, there's a lot of pairing going on without even the need to say pairing. They just do it. Maintenance, other teams, architecture, all interesting perspectives. Maybe can talk about these offline if anybody's interested. So backlog. I like to use the backlog for 2 things mainly. One is protection, in the sense we do have 2 dimensions to define the scope for the release. So we write the stories. So that's a constructive part of, so we're adding something. But also we can exclude stories. We can say, yeah, that's an interesting story, but we won't do that right now. So you have a destructive dimension to your scope. So what we're doing is we keep the stories that are excluded, we keep them visible in the backlog so that people know when they're working on one story, say, oh, there's this other story, but it's excluded, so that means implicitly it's not part of that one. I don't even have to ask the question. And as usual, I guess you all went through this. The end game of each release is a bit stressy, maybe. And there's a lot of feature creep coming in, because that's usually the moment everybody's excited anyways, and they say, oh yeah, I can do that, oh I will do that right now, but they forget that there was something more important maybe that they could have done right now. And this is where we protect against this feature creep by just saying, oh, this could be interesting to do also, let me write the story. Product owner will rank it. Sometimes it will bubble up, sometimes it won't. And it helps us protect and keep the stress out of the end game. Prediction. As I mentioned, as soon as we had a velocity, we could predict the scope, at least a bit, that we would have at the end of the release. Oh. Okay. So we lost the graphics. Sorry. I can. So if you find me on at the coffee or something, I can show you the burn downs. I'm sorry. Somehow they got lost between my machine and this machine. Any time left? Testimonials. Oh, maybe usability. Did we see usability? I think I said that already. So the date picker story I said. So this was the first release that we were working with designers up front, delivery team. So they were thinking about designs before the story started. In past releases, we shipped the designers, the user experience people would assess what we shipped and then would say us what we did badly, and then they were running after us with recommendations, trying to have us fix it. That didn't work. So this time they were no future. Okay. No, so future. So as I said, there was an experience. There was a release that we did. We did that 1.5 years ago. So since we delivered a second release with a slightly modified team, so the team was a bigger, but we delivered on the same components. We did the third release with a smaller team. So we actually that big team, we split that into 2 Scrum teams. Half of them went to continue to deliver the third release on these new components, and the other team went off for a very innovative project that was creating a new product. So the future is actually happening, and we continue the journey, and it's looking good. Thank you everybody for listening. More questions, comments?
Which tools do you use to track your progress?
RDC, Rational Team Concert. Oh, pub, advertisement. Yes, but we it's customized in many ways. So there's the Scrum template in there, but the organization decided to customize that a lot. The burn downs that you didn't see are not part of RDC, but they are available on the Jazz website as extensions.
Can you just describe the work of the testers?
Yes.
Writing how to test in the backlog, or were they writing test?
Yes. So what we're trying to do is to have testers work in 3 areas during the sprint, really during the sprint. I mean, and that's the tester that is part of the team. So contribute, as I explained, to the definition of the stories, the acceptance tests, adding the boundary cases that he can think of. And then maybe the most important part, start manual testing features as soon as they are committed by a developer. So that's what the daily Scrum is for. That's why we are collocated. Is the developer says, "Hey, I just committed this part of the thing I'm working on," and the tester would just pull the code and start testing it, and then go back to the developer and say, "Yeah, that works fine," or "Oh, I think you forgot this case." So they have very fast feedback, the developers. And the third responsibility of the testers that are working on the sprint with the team is to automate as many of these tests that they do manually as they discover the stories, to automate them so that we do have them for non-regression in future sprints.
This work was on the Scrum board?
No. Sometimes it was more explicit, so there was some stories maybe were more challenging for this mode than others. So then we did that. We did put that explicitly during the planning meeting, but that was just their day job, right? So that's what they did all day. Okay. No more questions. Thanks. So, thank you.